I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stat.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to an episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. I'm sorry, I've been kind of out of the loop lately. Haven't been putting out tons of content. That is going to change. I'm kind of back on track now. Dealing with lots of shit, and then also I made some statements that made it international. It made international news, so I've done enough talking and trying to sit back and listen and reflect on things and continue forward. But I'm back. There's a lot that's been going on around the world over the last couple weeks, and I wanted to cover some of that, specifically in Ukraine with the war between Ukraine and Russia. I covered this with Ryan back in, I think it was back in March, episode, I forget what episode number it was, but it's one of the pinned episodes on my channel. So if you go there, you'll see it. It's the one with Ryan in it. And we talked about the war back then. And a lot of the stuff that Ryan talked about ended up being the case. And you guys know me. I don't know what is 100% true about what's going on, but I like to have people back on who have been right in the past. And Ryan has been consistently right about a lot of this stuff. So I brought him back on to talk about what is going on over in Ukraine. How you doing, Ryan?
Pretty good, man. Good sweatshirt you there. Is that the antiwar.com shirt?
Antiwar.com. That's it. Yeah.
Original logo. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can only wish. We wish these wars would end, but sometimes they're inevitable. Yeah. Last time we talked about how the sanctions were not going to work, how they were planning to kick Russia off of SWIFT. And it's weird that someone like myself could understand that. And we've got all these cabinet members and politicians and from Europe and the United States that all thought it was going to have a different outcome. It's because they hire based on nepotism and they hire people for telling them what they want to hear instead of the truth. And that's how you end up with disasters like that. And because the sanctions didn't work the way they planned, it changed the entire outcome of the war.
Yeah. So the big thing everyone's talking about right now is the Ukrainian counteroffensive that's kind of pushing Russia back. So what is actually happening there? How much have they pushed Russia back? Is this from all the recent money they've gotten? They were able to put more weapons on the front lines. Like, how did this happen? And what is the extent of the counteroffensive actually?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me. Yeah, they definitely got more money and more weapons, but this ties into what I just said. When they started this war, and they had been antagonizing Donbass. They had plans to invade in March. Russia preempted that. Really, Donbass preempted that by, again, trying to secede and become independent states, which Russia and Syria recognized, and then North Korea recognized. Why not, right? But nobody at the Pentagon or anyone else had any delusions that they were going to march on Moscow or something. They knew this would have to be a defensive war. They assumed, and you can hear a lot of these turkeys say this, that it would be the new Afghanistan, referring to when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. It became their Vietnam, right? They lost a lot of soldiers' money. Their plan was to have a war of attrition. And in order to do that, they thought the sanctions, the global sanctions that aren't so global, and kicking them off SWIFT and other means was going to bleed Russia and make the clock on Ukraine's side. They had bunkers, they had zigzag entrenchments. They were going to make everything a Pyrrhic victory and bleed the Russians, force them to go on the offense. In a short time scale. They have to charge the porcupine. It's never worth it. Except That's not what happened. Not only did the sanctions not really damage Russia, the opposite happened. The sanctions hurt Europe and hurt Ukraine. They're going to have a very nasty winter of their own doing. And so sitting back in their defensive positions wasn't working. Russia was on their own time scale. They called it the meat grinder. They could just sit back with their artillery, which they have far more ammo for and range, and just make it rain all day, every day, and slowly grind them out. And the advantage of that type of warfare is you're not losing personnel. It's not very quick because they're bunkered in. Mostly going to damage, things. And so like they hit the supply depots, they hit their ammo depots, they hit their fuel depots in the very beginning of the war and their airfields, and then withdrew to protect Donbass. Well, they grinded their way through. So Ukraine realized, if we continue to play defense and hope they're going to charge our trenches, they're just not going to. They're going to hit us with artillery forever, and we're slowly just going to lose this. So they have to go on the offense. They're going to have to get out of their hole, and this is what they did on 3 different fronts: in Kherson in the west, and Zaporozhye in the middle, and Kharkiv in the northeast. And the first 2 failed miserably. They lost about 6,000 in personnel, and they didn't gain any territory. They didn't really inflict much damage, and they got hit real hard. NATO troops joined them in the Kharkiv offensive, which was the most lightly defended because there's nothing up there. It was a couple towns. It was the only reason the Russians were there at all is sort of just because the Americans had sent in HIMARS and longer range artillery. They wanted the periphery to be far enough away that it would not affect civilians in Donbass. Because you remember, the Ukrainians had hit a train station and a grocery store with grad rockets and things. So they're like, in order to protect them, we got to get way almost to the Dnieper if we can, really far away. Kharkiv city is the second biggest city in Ukraine. Russia had no intention of a target like that full of, 1 million civilians, but they were around it, and Ukraine really never reached that far. But the Kharkiv region, Russia was so excited that these fools got out of their defensive posture to try to have a decisive battle. But since it was the thinnest part of the line, they basically sidestepped them, pulled their guys out of the way, because then they could send in their air force and their artillery and catch Ukraine in open fields, which they did. So on paper, to some noob, it looks like, oh my gosh, look at all this many square miles of territory that we can change the color on the map. But so what? Okay, you got some hills and forests and stuff, but you lost almost 10,000 people that you couldn't afford. So it was a victory only on Twitter. Like, it was a psychological victory for Ukraine. We got territory, but you didn't acquire the territory by defeating the other army. You just left your very tightly controlled defensive positions, and then it was just open season. You were sitting ducks, and Russia picked you off all day. Nothing really good came of that, other than it was good PR, perhaps. It looked cool to people who don't know much about war, but it was not effective on the battlefield. The horrible thing, though, is those couple towns that they captured, all those people are probably getting tortured or murdered. But it's a cold calculation, and Russia decided, we're going to lose these towns, but we're going to almost wipe out the entire front, all these BTGs in one blow of the Ukrainian army. About 20% of that offense was NATO, though, and they also got killed, which I'm sure Russia doesn't mind. And so at the same time, in Bakhmut, which is the most topographically defended place in this entire war, the industrial zone got overtaken by the Wagner group, and now they're surrounded. I expect that to fall by the end of the week. And from there, it'll be up to Slavyansk. Russia also pulled out of Izum, but the whole reason they were in Izum, and I think I said this on your show last time, was they were doing a double pincer move to surround Ukrainian troops in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, but it's kind of like a crab's claw. Well, the bottom part in Popasnia made a breakthrough and did that enclosure, and they got Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. So the one in Izum didn't matter if it went down or not. Just had to hold the position. They basically just backed up across the river. Ukraine tried to hit them while they were on retreat, but they couldn't penetrate the periphery forces, and they really didn't get anything out of it. But they colored it in on the map. Oh, look, this is ours now. But that's, again, not a defensive position they need to hold. They already got their envelopment and took the 2 cities, which is far more important than the forest of Izum. So Ukraine has been losing pretty badly on all fronts, but they continue to keep lying and asking for more weapons and toys. And they even attacked a nuclear power plant, which is probably not going to cause a fission reaction like Chernobyl or anything, but you could hit the spent fuel rods like what happened in Fukushima and still cause a major disaster that would blow radioactive material all over the area. And that is a mess to clean up and impossible to do during the middle of a war. They're desperate. I mean, they're emptying their jails. They're asking women to fight now. That like, if you're winning a war, that's not the kind of things you do. Russia, on the other hand, has made partial mobilization. They're going to bring in about 300,000 to do auxiliary roles, basically free up the people doing that now so they can go back to the front. And that's because the war aims changed. The SMO, Special Military Operation, was supposed to protect Donbass. But then as soon as it starts, Ukraine started attacking ethnic Russians everywhere, including in Kherson. And so they moved up from Crimea and took over that too and pushed them out of there. So the front is much longer and stretched than anticipated. And they decided, we are going to protect ethnic Russians wherever they reside, which is going to include Odessa, by the way. And so with 300,000, this won't be like 300,000 crack soldiers trained on the everything. It's more going to be the knick-knacky, truck driver, and not knocking on truck driver. I'm just saying it's not the same as being a fighter pilot. I'm just saying, like, doing deliveries and the logistical, very important role, but much easier to get someone up to speed on that kind of activity than to learn the complexities of being a drone operator or a fighter pilot. Or artillery is not a point and shoot thing like a video game. It's a lot of math and physics and computation, and it takes a lot of training. And it takes a lot of training to coordinate all these things together. People have this delusion of video game. You get a bird's eye view of the map and can move all the pieces around. You don't see that from the ground. Like, you can from satellite a little bit, but hybrid warfare is complicated. It takes practice. It takes training. Of course, the enemy is going to change, and you have to adapt and think. And so they have that. They're going to free up those troops. The Wagner groups, like the Russian Blackwaters, full of mercenaries. They have volunteer fighters from Chechens. And then the other reason for the referendums they're doing starting tomorrow. Well, no, the 23rd. It'll be tomorrow. It's Japan's day. Right. Starting from the 23rd. 99% chance they're all going to vote to join the Russian Federation. Maybe 1% chance they're going to vote for independent states and a confederation, and 0% chance of staying with Ukraine. If it becomes Russian proper, which it will, 2 major things are going to happen. 1, now you're attacking Russia, which changes the rules. 2, they're all now Russian citizens. And so the Donbass militias and things that have been fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Russians now can have combat salaries, Russian healthcare, and all the same benefits that Russian soldiers have, which is a really good boost for them. And legally, it changes what Russia can do, and they can bring in their reserves. And so now they're all be part of the Russian army and allowed their equipment and all the other benefits that come with it. So their command, most likely.
So, along with the partial mobilization, Russia's back on nuclear standby, right? Wasn't Putin warning the West of nuclear potential again?
Well, that was more the disaster of the power plant. That was the
Okay.
nuclear blackmail. Like, what are you going to blow up? They did aim at the cooling system. I mean, these people are nuts. But these are the same people that saran wrap women to poles and, beat their heads in and strip them naked and break the bones in their fingers and the torture. By the way, the RT just released a documentary where the Ihor Kolomoisky brought in the Israelis to teach the Azov how to best torture civilians. Just
brought in the Israelis to teach the Azov.
Yeah.
Just in case anyone missed that.
Right. That's what happened, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this isn't again, it has nothing to do with being Jewish. Israel is a state, and they support the oligarchs, right? It's a donor class. That's what runs that country. That country is an apartheid regime. They have a pecking order between different J groups within Israel. Everybody knows this. They work with anyway. So there he did that, and Azov took the instructions. This happened in Iran too, right? The Savat was trained by the Mossad. This is before the revolution, and today, the 22nd, is the anniversary of the first day of the Iran-Iraq War. For you youngins that were not alive for that, it was nasty. It's 8-year-long brutal war, stalemate.
Where we gave Iraq the weapons of mass destruction that we found in Iraq when we invaded.
No, we just gave them pesticides.
Yeah.
Yeah. That became mustard gas.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have Farland and Rumsfeld, shaking hands with Saddam, and of course, Obama shook hands with Gaddafi too. How'd that turn out?
Yeah. So what's the UN and NATO's reaction to this been? It seems like they're not rethinking anything. They're just doubling down, right?
The UN, or the EU, excuse me, just had a meeting saying, "Oh, Russia's so desperate."
What I meant, EU. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Russia has veto power at the UN, so does China. But the EU came and said they're taking their semiconductors and microchips out of their washing machines and dishwashers to use on the front. No, they're not. That doesn't work either. But they're just making things up. And I don't get it. It seems like financial suicide. And there got to be people smart enough to realize this. Germany especially. They shut down their nuclear power. They shut down a pipeline that they had already paid for and built. They're not using the original one because they couldn't get the spare parts for it out of Canada in time. And look, Russia has plenty of buyers. They'll sell it to India. They'll sell it to China. They'll sell it wherever. And a lot of Europe is just buying it from India anyway. So Russia sells it to India. India sells it to Italy and whatever. And they're just selling. They're selling for less stuff for a higher price, which is the same. Like, it's not going to work. But Europe is in for a dark winter. They're already rationing heating in the UK already, and it's September. I know the UK doesn't have sun. It's just nighttime and then fog and rain and then nighttime again. They have this special holiday once a year, one day a year they call summer.
Yeah.
The mush heads crawl out of the pubs and go, "What is that shiny thing?" They're hurting, and a lot of it is the sanctions on natural gas. And I brought it up either on your show. I definitely brought it up on RBN because we talked about it for a while in there. Remember back in February, when you sanction natural gas, you're losing a lot of the chemicals you need in fertilizer. And so you're having fertilizer shortages, nitric shortages. So you're not going to have the yield of crops you expected. And it's gonna be really bad. The global south will most likely suffer first because Europe still can pay more than a lot of African nations or a place like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a special case, though, because they got hit by predatory loans by the Chinese. The Chinese were like, "Oh, that's okay. Just sell us your port. Let us operate your port right next to India." Yeah. A lot went, and then in ESGs and they had a perfect storm. I'm not going to say it's just because of the sanctions on Russia, but certainly didn't help. But if you look at places like Mali, like in Bamako right now, their capital, it looks like Ethiopia in the 80s. It's horrible. And it's because they're not getting fertilizer, and the price costs too much for food. It costs too much for gas. That's going to, it's going to break a lot of these places. And here come the refugees, which Europe cannot absorb. And it's going to get bad for them too. It's not going to be a food and gas is too expensive problem. It's going to be a food and gas aren't available problem.
Yeah,
and
so
they're delusional. They're like, no, that's not going to happen.
Didn't Russia make a deal with China on that pipeline that they're going to take it out of China instead of continuing the Nord Stream 2 or whatever it is pipeline?
Well, Nord Stream is built and all. I mean, Germany just won't. They're like, no, we're not buying it from you. Okay. I mean, you're lost. Look, you need to buy it a lot more than they need to sell it. They can sell it to China. There are a lot of people. Everybody's thirsty for fuel. And you can't just make that up by buying more from Saudi Arabia, UAE or something, because they're already pulling as much out and processing it out of the ground as fast as they're already at maximum production. And they're not too fond of the United States and their female vice president. That doesn't float well in a Islamic monarchy in Saudi Arabia. For real. Yeah. They made SNL type skits about it. And she's a moron anyway. I mean, Russia's a big country. I love her advice about this is YouTube, the thing that went around that caused lockdowns. She said, viruses are very, very small. Thank you, Kamala.
She's not wrong. I got
she got something right, Better than some of these kooks that are virus deniers, like, there's no such thing. I'm for the Terran theory.
Yeah.
Some of these people. But I don't see a solution for Europe unless they have, votes of no confidence and get rid of their leadership and get rid of the sanctions and trade with Russia again.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about when you were on last time, and then I talked to Peter Schiff like a few days later, was that this was only going to strengthen Russia and China's ties. And now Xi Jinping and Putin met for the first time since the war began. First time Xi Jinping's left the country in 2 years. What took place at that meeting? Like, what type of things are Russia and China going to start working on together more now?
China's bringing all these people in the Shanghai Corporation, and they're going to have. Xi Jinping's got an election too in October. I expect him to win another 10-year term, which is basically life for Pooh Bear. Putin made a speech to all the ambassadors that arrived from everywhere outside what they're calling the collective West. I hate jumping on that wagon, but Europe, the US, Australia, New Zealand, Korea, and Japan, basically all the rich places. But he went through. And this is without a teleprompter or anything. This is what a statesman ought to be able to do. And went through deal after deal that he had made in their friendship with this country, that country, this country, that, memorized, right? He knew it all. It's exactly what you'd expect. Pipelines are going to China, something that never would have happened if they could go the other direction, right? They're even incorporating Iran. I can see Iran in the future doing oil trades on the ruble. The ruble has proven its stability. And I don't think it's going to be rocked by the 300,000 men going into the front line, or not front lines, but going into Donbass. The economy there is still going to be strong. And a lot of the basket of currencies, one of the ways around it was getting a lot of yuan from China. And man, China is starving for oil and gas, and Russia has plenty. You morons. Like, this was them, Russia having its Europe-philism or whatever is what kept Europe on top. This is an irreversible situation. Europe is not going to ascend to its period of, colonial power time. They're on top because they got so far ahead in the race. This is going to set them back, and there isn't a way to climb back up. Like, the future is in Asia now. China had 4 economic cooperative zones that practice free markets, so they didn't all starve to death. And those areas are now doing better than anywhere in Europe. That's amazing. Like, China used to be a laughing stock. Like, oh, China, they make dollar store widgets and work for $1 a day. That was a situation they were in under communism. And Europe was the exact opposite. It was something to, respectable.
Mm-hmm.
It's now China's richer than anywhere in Europe. So is Japan. So is Korea. In fact, Korea is still wealthier than Russia, but how long will that last? Their currency, the won and the yen, I believe, are worth about 70 cents and 72 cents. Wow. And before the war, the yen was worth about $1, 100 yen to the dollar, maybe 97. Now it's 70. And that's with the dollar dropping too.
Yeah.
They've devastated themselves. Japan is a bad situation because the day before election, someone assassinated Shinzo Abe in Nara.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know his name, Tetsuya, but it wasn't just someone. But that caused everybody to go super right wing and adopt all of Abe's policies, no compromise, because the man was shot and it was on film. And I went down to Yamato Saidaiji. I live near where he was killed. There was a line, this is days after, in like 90-degree heat, 5 blocks of people with bouquets of flowers and other memorabilia to just lay on a table. These 3 long tables they had, collecting these things for Shinzo Abe. So Kishida went nuts, and they're held, they're kind of beholden to the U.S. thumbing its nose at, with the Taiwan-China situation. And so the world's a mess, but their currencies have dropped. Now, as long as they have corona restrictions, it's not that big a deal. I can buy the same things I could buy anyway, because the yen went down only relative to other things. Bread is bread, all that's the same. But if I were to buy anything from abroad, plane tickets or anything like that, it's going to cost way more. But they don't have tourism still. They still have these moronic guided tours. That's supposed to change in October. So once the tourists come in, that will give a big boost to the Japanese economy, and South Korea will probably follow Japan in that, and they'll come back up somewhat. But the situation with Europe is different. Japan gets most of its coal from Canada. It gets its LNG from Australia. It gets oil from the Middle East. It was never really dependent on Russia anyway. But Germany and Italy both definitely were. All of them were heavily dependent on that and the fertilizer. And so they're looking around Algeria, Nigeria, who can replace this. The other thing that people don't seem to understand is not all oil is the same. There's difference between heavy crude and light crude and different types and grades of oil and gas and how they're refined. And you can't just switch one with another, like just blah, blah, blah. The only country with enough variety of refineries and things to pull something like that off is the United States. And even US gets a lot of oil from Canada and Mexico, and it has oil reserves, which they're dipping into right now. And so they're like, oh, yeah, but the price started going down again. I'm like, you are so short-sighted. They're dipping into strategic reserves, and not all of it's even going to Americans. Joe Biden sold strategic reserve oil to the Chinese.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, when it goes from 250 to 7 back down to 4, that's oil prices dropping.
Right. That's like Obama saying he cut future spending. Well, we were going to spend $4 billion, but we only spent $3.5 billion. So that's a deduction of $500 million. I'm like, no, that's $3.5 billion you spent. Yeah. They say we saved $500 million. Like, no, you didn't. You just spent less. And that kind of fuzzy math stuff worked there. They did that all the time. Well, we were aiming at $800 billion. We only spent $790 billion. So we saved $10 billion.
That's like, no, $10 billion in your pocket.
Yeah, you lost 790. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But Democrats in math, that's why they think there's a gender wage gap. not doing the women can't do math stereotype any favors there when you say stuff like on average. They don't understand what on average means.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're so outraged that they need something to be the conclusion that fits their worldview, so they don't pay attention to any of the facts.
So let's briefly talk about China. What is the situation like over there where you are as far as aggression from the United States doing military drills in the South China Sea, Nancy Pelosi actually visiting Taiwan? What is it like over there? It seems like it's kind of hot.
Yeah, but not as much as the U.S. media has made it seem like, oh man, they're going to nuke Taiwan or something. I like that South Koreans wouldn't even meet with Pelosi. I said, yeah, they're arachnophobic. But she went there and they wouldn't meet with her. They're like, nope, you don't get to meet anybody.
Based.
Japan has this, is culturally just won't rock the boat. They're just whatever, smile at you and then just ignore everything you just said. It's a different way of snubbing that they didn't realize. Taiwan was all about it. But, what was the point of that? I don't think, I know Scott Ritter and some others is saying China's going to invade Taiwan and sink all of our fleet with their hypersonic missiles and whatever. I don't think so. It's not that they couldn't sink boats. It's the submarines that are the issue, but forget about the who has what toy. It's politically, China is this close to taking Taiwan anyway. Right. There's a pro-Japan party. There's a pro-China party. I think I said this on Horseman, but and they almost edged out the pro-Japanese party last go around. And so they could be 1 or 2 elections away from getting the unification party in and taking Taiwan without firing a bullet. They would much rather do that than go to war with 25 million people with US and Japanese allies, right? Why would you start a conflict when you're about to win without one? Now, how about the reverse? Who'd like to start a conflict because they're about to lose without one?
Yeah.
The United States. So what are they going to do? They're going to sail through the strait and just sophomoric, immature stuff. You're playing chicken with the world war, but this is what they're doing. This is, look at our people. We don't have any adults in the room. We have a president that doesn't know where he is, can't find his way off a stage, shakes hands with invisible people. We have a vice president that, I don't know.
Those viruses are very small.
Right. She's just high all day or what's going on there. There's nothing upstairs.
Yeah.
And then look at his cabinet. I mean, look at their press secretary. She's like, I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here because I'm a black lesbian. Yeah. She just had some check boxes and got a job. There's no clue what she's doing. The ginger that was there before also had no answers. Because this stuff, their policies are nuts.
Yeah, I can't believe they made Jen Psaki look good by comparison. That was pretty hard, but
that's the old joke. I don't know if it was Rogan or somebody on his show or something, but he said, do you think like they were talking about Sarah Palin or Dan Quayle's where it starts, and they're like, everyone's like, yeah, look what we did. And some guys in the back of their arms crossed, like, nah, we could go dumber. And then they get George Bush, and then you get Sarah Palin, and then you get Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And this is a funny thing. I was talking to Andrei Makinov, who is a Russian analyst. He lives in the US, but very good detailed things on economic books and warfare toys and all these things. Very smart guy. And he says, fluent in Russian, obviously he's from there originally. He said Psaki is now a verb in Russia to mean like foobar. So like it got Psaki'd. It just means when you just like completely don't answer something. And you look at their foreign ministers and their press secretaries and their defense ministers, they're articulate, they know what they're doing, they're not reading teleprompters. And then you see our flock of we just it's like brainless seagulls. Just, they can't answer like, why are you flying migrants around in the middle of the night? We're having migrant warfare now. I'm going to drop these off in your state. Well, we're going to drop them off at your house. Well, we're going to drop them off here, which I think is hilarious. I'm like, bring on the clowns, enjoy the decline.
Yeah. That's what I said a few months
I'm
ago.
Nero.
Remember, I used to wish I was born like 40 years earlier, but at this point, I'm
Mm-mm.
like, you know what? Fuck it. This is hilarious. So I
Front
just want to
row
be here.
seat. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so Biden, he's twice now said that the United States will militarily intervene if Taiwan's attacked, and he's been corrected both times. This latest time, I forget what news show he was
They
on.
corrected the correction though. They're like, no, man, they're delusional. You just lost to the Taliban. And guess what? Guess what? That $80 billion worth of equipment, guess where it went? To China.
Mm-hmm.
They sold it to the Chinese who are reverse engineering all your goodies. And they already get a lot of it from the Israelis anyway. Now they got it from the Taliban. I did a whole movie on what Israel gave them the specs for the F-16 and the Sidewinder missile. One of the only supersonic missiles the U.S. possesses. Now China has it. Thank you, greatest ally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're in a fantasy world. And I think, and I'm hoping that the MICs on both sides are just rattling sabers so they can justify larger and larger budgets to build giant useless ships and stuff like this, with Taiwan being the excuse. I hope, I don't like pointless profiteering, but that's the best scenario.
Right.
Because
fewer people dying.
Yeah, that's just people building a bunch of toys and going, well, the Americans come, we have to build a bigger Navy, we have to build this. They go, oh, Chinese threaten us, we have to build more submarines and this and that. And they do that with North Korea, they do whatever. I hope that's all it is. Because if it's not that, if they're seriously gearing up thinking we cannot take over China, China cannot take over the US.
Right.
Nobody can win in the other guy's yard. Okay.
Right.
Like the US is a more powerful country, but it cannot project power that far. And you're not going to win a land battle in China or Asia anywhere. You're just not.
Yeah. We got a super chat here. There's an interesting debate I'd like to see regarding 9/11, Scott Horton versus Ryan Dawson. Any thoughts? We kind of did that last year, sort of, on the Four Horsemen, but
well, I mean, I think before we could even have a debate, he should just sit down and listen to what I have to say, because he might not even disagree.
Yeah, I saw he went on Kim Iverson's show and was talking about the Saudis giving logistical and financial support to the 77 hijackers, and I think there's what is considered the official story versus what is, and this is the other thing I wanted to talk about while I had you on the show, the official narrative versus the conspiracy theories is a really clouded line, because
I don't think Scott and I disagree on much on 9/11. I know he knows about Omar Bayumi, Osama Hassan, and all that stuff. The parts he's missing is about the art students and the Israelis. He knows about dancing Israelis, but he only knows the surface level about them. And the Gray Zone did the same thing. They just wrote a piece last year on 9/11. Pretty good. And I really like the Gray Zone and Aaron Mate, and I like Blumenfeld, and I like most of the people who work there. But they fell for a sucker trap. They did expose that the Israelis were spying on Arabs in the United States, but not about 9/11. And they did expose what a criminal Dominic Suter was, but it wasn't 9/11. And they weren't dancing, they were just celebrating nitpicky stuff. The problem was they rested their case on interviewing the guys, who are kind of lie to you, and they assumed that Maria, which is Maria Septimrilli, was the sole witness and the origin of all this information about the dancing Israelis, and she isn't. There are multiple other witnesses, and I mean, even photos from Langley and and our own field offices from Miami contacted Newark and said that these Israelis had been down there and given logistical support to the hijackers, just like the Saudis. And I don't think they're aware of any of that. And I don't think they would even argue with me about it once I told them about it, showed them it in the papers. They go, didn't know that. End of argument. That's all that would happen. There's nothing to debate.
The thing that sucks here is, I know from talking to Scott, he doesn't like to even talk about it because of all the kooks who come after him and won't leave him alone forever.
I agree. Me too. Yeah. Like it's like dissing Bitcoin or vegans, or it's like saying, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, here they come. It's it's like saying smoking pot is bad for you. You will get it Speak on him. Someone said.
Yeah.
There is
Are you saying
visceral...
that cigarettes are better than pot, Ryan? Is that what you're saying? Like that's what it always.
Yeah.
Happens.
Are you saying that you should smoke crack? No. You know how it's just you're really hitting a beehive, and it's because of Alex Jones. Because all the other ones would not exist and would not have success without his loud mouth. No one would have heard of Loose Change or Fetzer or any of these morons if it hadn't been for the Earthquake Machine crisis actors guy. And he really, really turned the whole thing into a tar baby. Like other conspiracies just as large, like another portion of 9/11 I'd love to talk to Scott about actually is how it was wrongly used to start a war in Iraq. Because this is and Dave Smith agrees with me on this. This is a slam dunk case. You don't need to get into what Cheney was doing or how fast the buildings fell or any of that jazz when it's like, hey, they fucking lied about anthrax. They said that Iraqis, senior Iraqis gave it to Mohammed Atta in Prague, and Colin Powell went to the UN with a mock vial of anthrax, and they're breaking UN Resolution 1441.
And they is Czech and Israeli intelligence that claim to have witnessed
Czech and Israeli intelligence, and the Czechs then reneged on that. The Israelis never did. James Woolsey brings it over. New York Observer puts it in. LA Times puts it in their papers. Observer's owned by Kushner, by the way. Gary Schmidt writes about it. PNAC did an interesting thing. They wrote about the Prague meeting. First, they wrote about Iraq having anthrax, and then the Prague meeting. First, they just said Iraq met with Al-Qaeda. That's already a crime, right? They're associated. Then they're like, oh, yeah. They wait till the anthrax gets opened, and they go, oh, yeah, remember that story about Iraq meeting with Al-Qaeda? Guess what? They also gave them anthrax, which was BS.
Right.
Patrick Leahy's targeted with anthrax that had some catalyst added to it. It's weapons grade anthrax. Bruce Ivins gets exonerated after he died. He did not have the ability, equipment, or anything to do it. And I know Scott knows this because Justin Raimondo wrote about it. We do have people on film stealing anthrax from Fort Detrick in the 90s. Philip Zach and a cohort, Marion Rippey, that was let them in at night and do illegal gain of function research, which is, let's call it what it is, weaponization of anthrax. And there were 29 missing spores, not like vials of spores or whatever, samples, and they tried to frame an Egyptian coworker and blah, blah, blah. It's a long story, but nobody was interested in even bringing that up or questioning somebody who had stolen anthrax in the past. It definitely had cohorts still working at the lab that were removing samples for something, right?
Right.
Could be unrelated, could not, but why didn't the FBI question these people, right? And, obviously it wasn't Osama bin Laden, and it wasn't Al-Qaeda, and it wasn't Iraq, and all three got blamed. It wasn't Stephen Hatfield, and he got exonerated. And then Bruce Ivins allegedly kills himself before his trial.
Yeah, so who are they officially sticking it on
Perry
now?
Maxwell.
Is it Bruce Ivins that they officially stick that on these days?
Netflix has a series on it now. I haven't seen it, but other people's like, Ryan, don't watch it. You're gonna get triggered. It's just junk. They make it look like Bruce Ivins did it all by himself. And dude, he didn't. Bruce Ivins, explain this. It's the same things of why Stephen Hatfield got exonerated. If Ivins did this by himself, how did he get down to Florida and then New Jersey to mail these letters and show up at work in Maryland the same and without any plane tickets? It doesn't make any sense. And it's just no one. They're like, nope, he did it. He's a guy at the lab. He's a little weird. He must have done it. They needed to depend on somebody. And then the note said death to America, death to Israel. And whoever sent the hoax anthrax happened to know what the note in the real anthrax was. So it has to be the same organization. And this is what they write on the notes. And then you've got these very Zionist neocon outfits lying about Iraq and anthrax. Like bin Laden didn't plan all that. Someone else connected Iraq to anthrax. Now you could still say, sure, they did that and they just used the situation on 9/11 and they had nothing to do with it. I'm okay with that. I disagree, but fine. Can we not get them on what they did?
Yeah.
They lied about anthrax and started War of the Rock. They ought to all be
Right.
fired, in prison. Some consequence should happen, and it never does.
Mm-hmm.
And how did they know where to mail the anthrax from unless they knew where the hijackers were? It's almost like they'd been living next door to them.
Yeah, it's like you said on the Rise to Liberty podcast. There's lots of speculation that we don't know is true, but what we do know is about the Saudis aiding the hijackers and the Israelis lying to us about the anthrax and lying us into a war, and that alone right there are two
and
biggest allies.
They also gave support to hijackers.
Right.
And the stuff like that was in the mostly unredacted 28, right? The consecutive, there was far more. There are other whole pages of redactions in the JIS report, but it was 28 consecutive pages, and a lot of that got unredacted, and much of it was talking about that paper trail going back to Bandar Bush and Princess Haifa, to intermediaries that were aiding Noifa Hazmi and Claudio Midhar. And I found another one to Hanji Hanjor, and I found another one to Al Shehi from the UAE. But where do I go with this? It's like, okay. Oh, we found one with Mohammed Zammar and Atta too, which was not in the Pentbomb report and wasn't in the JIS report, but it was in reporting when they did a prisoner swap in Syria that he had been a bagman for Atta. And now I went over it with Adam Fitzgerald the other day anyway.
Yeah.
But like, I don't even know who to tell this information to. What am I going to tell CNN or Fox that it'll never get on TV? I'm banned on everything online. And even if I spelled it all out and sat there with the maps and stuff, which I have done, they'll just erase it and it gets lost in the ether of stupid. That's the 9/11 kook movement that's talking about missiles and shoot down a 93 and a bomb on every floor and whatever, and nanothermite and mannequins and do weapons and mini nukes and just the dumbest holograms. And
the mannequins is my favorite one. I actually hadn't heard that one until this year.
I had forgotten about it. I'd heard that, and I also heard Laura something another. She's like a fake nuclear scientist, con artist. She was in Japan. I know her translator, Yumi, was also translated a comic book called Addicted to War. Really cool book, by the way. And I had just written Welcome to USSA and got invited to this thing. I was like the gaijin that spoke Japanese, I guess. I went to dinner with them and all that, and I knew way more about 9/11 than she did. But she started telling this group of Japanese business people that they were throwing plane parts out of another plane to make it look like 93 had debris. And I was just like, unbelievable.
So this is why Scott doesn't touch it right here. This shit.
Well,
lots of smart people.
I agree. I agree with Scott because he let me talk about it before. Yeah. I was like so afraid when I was like scared I was going to get killed like for real until I got out of the country in a way. I'm like, oh, I don't want to say this on the radio, like, because I had people calling the phone in my house and stuff and making threats. And, it's probably just pissed off Zionists from the ADL or whatever. But, they took one line I had in War by Deception where I said there was an Israeli cabal, because there was, and made that look like some anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, and which is just nonsense. I didn't even say the J word in the entire documentary because there's no need to, right? It was just, look, Israel and Saudi Arabia are countries and they engage in these things, and the US did this and that, and whatever. It's I get sick even talking about it because every time I do, people get mad at me and call me a government shill or an agent or whatever, because I won't say there's a bomb on every floor, controlled demolition, blah, 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 blah. And, I thought at first, it looks suspicious. They pre-announced Building 7 falling and all that, but every single fireman was not surprised.
Right.
The southwest corner was missing. Was missing. There's fire on every floor. And I explored that for a while. I was like, well, maybe they let it burn and it's minimal, but that makes sense too. A lot of firemen had died that day, and Larry Silverstein made a decision to pull out and watch it burn. They're like, he tried to get double insurance. I'm like, well, he had multiple buildings attacked. Why not try to get it? He didn't get it. Like,
yeah.
And then why do you insure it for terrorism? Like, because those same buildings have been
they've been
attacked in
bombed.
1993 by a Ryder truck. Like,
Yeah.
And so they get all these Class D arguments, and they go after a guy. He's ugly, he's old, he's rich. He's all the things leftists hate. But none of his decisions are unordinary at all.
Right.
It's what any owner would have done. Now he's a schmuck for other reasons, but
yeah,
they're always like, Larry Silverstein said pull it. I'm like, that's not even your own words. It comes from Alex Jones. That was his go-to routine. He's like a chimpanzee. Pull it's an industry term. It fell in its own footprint in 6 seconds. No building ever fell from fire. Jet fuel can't melt steel beam. Blah 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 blah. And I'm sitting there like, these talking points are not yours.
Right.
You're just repeating a master charlatan with just utter garbage.
Yeah.
But each thing requires an explanation. They do the same crap with the Pentagon. You got to go to the Rolls-Royce engine and why do light poles fall down and this and this and this. It's a death by 1,000 cuts because you have to explain away every talking point or they're not satisfied. And it's like a creationist. It's like, explain the universe.
Or my theory happened. Yeah.
Or, if not A, B, or it's my Sky Daddy.
Yeah.
Okay. Could be a Sky Daddy, but that's based on faith. And I'm not arrogant enough to be like, oh, I know. I mean, all we can even observe is baryonic matter and light and a few other things. But, I'm going to go with empiricism. If we ever find answers to disease, all the partial things we've learned have been through that. So whatever. But that's the kind of stuff they do. If not A, then B. Explain how the buildings fell. If not, then it's a bomb on every floor. Like, well, mostly fire. Now, the fire, however, and this is another nuanced thing that I can never get out without getting interrupted by everybody bombed at stuff, is fire absolutely can burn down a building. But it seems like the fire prevention systems in the World Trade Centers have been sabotaged prior to the attack, which helped maximize the damage from fire because the sprinklers didn't come on. And those guys did get arrested and had an unexplained pass to do work in the World Trade Centers. And Denko Mechanical was just some residential address. And then those guys had fake fire suppression credentials and letters and things. And so there was a giant cell. The key witness was murdered the day before the trial. The ringleader got a $250,000 bail. And I don't know a lot of guys that are immigrants that drive aero trucks that have $250,000 laying around. But, Khalid Al-Dalla and Sakur Hamad, these people have names. I've documented all this too. Catherine Smith was murdered. That part of 9/11 always is missing. That the fire prevention systems are sabotaged, which maximizes fire. They're uninterested in that because it's not as cool as thermite bombs or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, but this has real people and a paper trail. And so whatever. That's one missing part. And then there also is some evidence for vans with explosives in them in the parking garage. That was reported by Rick Sanchez and Pat Dawson and the chief of police, or the chief of the fire department. And then the police did take a van out to the Church of Dades area away from the World Trade Center that they believed had an explosive device. There was another van pulled over by George Washington Bridge that was reported live of having enough explosives to blow up the bridge. And a third van that had traces of explosives, which is the van the dancing Israelis had been driving. A lot of these were all moving company vans. And then we find out there's 6 different moving companies that are related by all the phone numbers in a book caught on their person when they were pulled over. And they lied and said they pulled the police over to ask for directions how to get back to New York because all the connections were closed. BS. They're on their way back from White Glove. We know because they took pictures and stuff in their cameras and we know what they were doing. I got interrogated. They all had different stories for the timeline. They're all lying out their ass. Sivan Kursberg had been pictured at Doric Towers on September 10th and 7th. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's deeper that people like Horton, people like smart people just never got to hear because Alex Jones.
Yeah.
And I can't get my foot in the door. I don't know what they know or don't know yet. I have to listen to them talk about it too. But then I'm like, hold on, you don't seem to know any of this part, right? And but again, even if I could tell all the libertarian people I know and all that the story of 9/11, then what? It's not going to be on TV, right? It's
well,
not
even if you get it
online.
even if you get it on TV, like this is my biggest thing is like no one will care. Like the 28 pages, like that's been reported by CNN. You know, you can find CNN articles or broadcasts about the Saudis logistically and financially aiding the hijackers. And
PBS had one this year because they uncovered video footage of I think it was Al Hazmi was on the camera and the other one wasn't, but the dinner party that they had in Bastons there. Fitzgerald and I went through and named all the people, like that's this guy, that's that guy. But there's footage of them celebrating, having dinner and stuff. I mean, they lived in their apartment. There's so much there and they don't care. They're just whatever. And they were laundering money through the Kuwaiti mosque. They had a bunch of different business fronts, which I've listed before. And it doesn't matter. It's like, look, they lied about WMDs for sure. Anyone get fired? No, they get promoted.
Yeah.
I mean, Judith Miller spent 85 days in jail from the Plame affair, I guess, not opening her mouth, and then gets hired by Fox. It's just the Gulf of Tonkin signal intelligence came out and proved that was a lie too. Nothing happened. Like, even if it was on TV, like, until it is the proper talking heads from both sides, it won't matter. And that's why I got sick of it and kind of gave up on it. Like, I put in like decades of work in this stuff, and the disinformation from Jonestown is so strong that you cannot talk about that whole subject in polite company because they're just going to roll their eyes and go, oh, another one of those.
Yeah.
Right. It's like some people can really talk deeply about theology, and then there's others that are just fundamentalists. The fundamentalists ruin it for everyone else, right?
Yeah.
Nothing puts people off to Christianity, Islam, whatever, more than some fanatic, right?
Yeah.
And a fanatic 9/11 dude, whatever, is just, they're the worst. And if you deny hijackers and planes, then you're not going to get the paper trail back to these foreign states.
Right.
Cy Hirsch wrote about it. It said whatever trail was left was meant to be found, and hinted at foreign involvement. But I even think he was like, I can't get near this tar baby. Like, Alex Jones made it so toxic to talk about 9/11 that career winning journalists were like, yeah, I ain't getting near that. Because it became a cult. And it became a cult by a guy that's having you microwave your $20 bills looking for RFID chips. Like, the dude is not nuts. He does it on purpose.
Yeah.
His job is to create a shit sandwich, like to just pour retard sauce on everything. And people are like, is he a government agent? And I'm like, I don't think so. I think he's just an opportunist, masterful bullshit artist.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people that know him. He really is like a patriot and a gun nut and all that, but he exaggerates more than a New Yorker.
That's bad.
And a New Yorker cannot say something's good. It's always the best, the worst, the number one. It's like people in LA about their fish tacos. Every single outfit is the best in the world. And they don't know how to not exaggerate. The guy will take something like cloud seeding, which is real, and take that to total weather control.
So a lot of people understand like how this benefited Israel, and then they're confused about why Saudi Arabia would want this to happen. So it really comes down to the war in Iraq, right? We basically made a promise that we could put our guy in power after Saddam Hussein. And then instead, they democratically elected the Dawa party, which is Shiite, which favors Iran. And then we had the Iran deal. And then actually, because of that, Obama told the Saudis, all right, I'll fund your genocide in Yemen to make you happy. And that's kind of why we are where we are.
Well,
now,
they
right?
wanted troops out of Mecca too, and that's something bin Laden asked, and that demand was met. George Bush did pull them out. But more or less, it's not about national interests. It's about select personal interests. I mean, that's how every country works. Well, American did not benefit with the war in Iraq.
Right.
And we didn't get oil out of Iraq.
Right.
But a bunch of neocon Zionists wanted a war in Iraq. They have a very powerful lobby, so off we went. The U.S. created a group called the Safari Club back in 76 to break the OPEC weapon that had happened to the Yom Kippur War of 73, caused gas shortages and long lines, fuel lines in the United States. And they realized we have to break up this cartel and get non-OPEC oil and gas. Well, eventually they'd build those pipelines from the Caspian Sea, BTC, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, right? But not right away. And so who had the largest reserves? Saudi Arabia. Then we're going to break up OPEC by bringing Saudi Arabia into the fold, into the nexus of the Israeli, French, and American nexus that already existed. That goes back to James Angleton and Ted Shackley and the people who killed Kennedy. And they said, we're going to bring them in. And they're going to send in Bechtel, and we're going to build sewage systems. We're going to build infrastructure for the Saudis, and they're going to pay for this oil money and petrodollar runoff and so on. We're going to modernize Saudi Arabia. We're going to support the monarchs there against their own, and that will break up OPEC. Middle East will not be able to use this oil weapon against us next time. And so they've had a deep relationship with the Saudi royal family, the Bushes in particular, with this Safari Club clique. And it was the Saudis that worked with the United States, laundering money through outfits like BCCI to finance the diaspora fighters with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan fighting the Soviets. And this is where Al Qaeda begins with Reagan's freedom fighters, right? Reagan and Bush, by the way. And Bush was director of the CIA when they created this clique. So that's why the Bush family is so tight with the Saudi family. He's the one that initiated this. Safari Club would go around. If you try to read about it on Wiki and stuff, they'll tell you about them all messing around in Africa. But no. That's not wrong, but it's
not truthful.
It's not. It's like a fraction of the pie. Yeah, it's omission wrong or something. Lie by omission. So they build up this group with bin Laden, working with them, and Zabriskie and these guys are supporting this faction in Afghanistan. And to learn who you're fighting tomorrow, see who you're aiding today, right? And there was a huge falling out. They did not like the U.S. putting bases on holy sites in Saudi Arabia. And Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda are a legit, real terrorist organization.
And this was in Osama bin Laden's fatwa as one of the 3 reasons he gave for declaring war on the United States because of that occupation.
And our own bin Laden unit spelled it all out. They're mad about the occupation of Palestine. They're mad about this happening in Saudi Arabia, invading Lebanon, which, I mean, if I lived there, those are real grievances. They're not just crazy or just evil. Like they have I get it. I can put myself in their shoes and see how, screw them. I mean, they're running civilian airlines in the is terrorism, but I understand how it gets to that point. It's not that different from flying a plane over a building and dropping a bomb on it. Right. At least their pilot killed himself. At least he was going to die for it. It's all wrong and messed up. But we're also killing their civilians and have been for a long time. Now, 2 wrongs don't make a right. But when you wrong people over and over again, they're not going to just sit there and take it. There will be blowback. And there was. And it's very hard to parse out how much of our intelligence failures were because it's government and they're inept, or if there was a look away list. And I side with no, it was on purpose, and they are incompetent. But not to that degree. There are a lot of incompetent retards in government. Government could drown in a puddle.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few Kissingers, Bakers, Zabrinskis that are not stupid. Cheney, he's not dumb. He's just evil.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Cheney spelled it all out in '94. Why we shouldn't go into Iraq, because it create a quagmire and threaten territorial integrity of Turkey, and the Kurds would fly off, the Sunni would fly off, the Shia, and he's telling that to George Bush in this interview. So they knew better. Mm-hmm. And we had a guy in office, pretty high level. He's a DOD guy. Now he's the vice president, who definitely knows what a disaster this is going to be and does it anyway. And so there are a lot of characters like that in government that for financial gain or whatever, they knew, but let it be, right? Mm-hmm. We need something to replace the Cold War. The war on terror is going to make us trillions. Ongoing conflict. MIC loves it. And I know some people are like, nah, man, who would do that? Really? Like, yes, you're talking about total psychopaths.
Yeah. Just look throughout history. It's not that shocking of a concept.
I mean, this is the CIA, the Pentagon. You think they have rational people that look? They made Bradley fighting vehicles out of aluminum, knowing damn well that was a death trap, and put our guys in them anyway because it costs a lot of money. And it's not their money. Oh, how many congressional districts can we rope in with the F-35 program? Cheap plug. I ripped into the F-35 and F-22 Raptor in this book on Amazon called The Separation of Business and State. But it gets to the revolving door, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to do that. But I mean, the books just shows why we need a separation of business and state. But we have been on a dark path since Lincoln. I mean, he is the guy that merged media and state by closing down all the newspapers that were not favorable to him. He creates the income tax and vastly, increased the power of the federal government. And it's been just a downward decline from there onward. We get worse and worse. We lose more and more liberties. The bloated budget, all these different departments that have arisen, the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, stuff that's natural. You don't need departments for. It gets more and more bloated, more and more bureaucracy, more and more unelected portions of government just for nepotism and giving away this and that to donors. Oh, you get to be the ambassador of Slovakia or whatever. And so, yeah, there's going to be a lot of incompetence. And I can really be almost agnostic at times. You're like, yeah, you know what? Maybe they're just that stupid. but
the sliding scale
says, what's the smoking gun on 9/11? I'm like, it's not just like, this. It's like when you put it all together, then you think, no, not even they could be that dumb.
Yeah.
But I'm always second guessing that when I see how Germany's reacting right now, closing down their nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
maybe they are that dumb. Yeah.
Either they're that dumb or the people in charge in Germany are destroying it on purpose.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's honestly a toss-up because I'm like, how could you be that stupid? But then, and a guy said this on my Telegram today, and this is such a black pill. He said, hey, Rye, we were just over here, right? I go, yeah, I was there in June. He goes, been to Walmart recently? It's like, nah, you know what? I actually wanted to go. And didn't go to Walmart. He goes, but you've been to Walmart. I go, yeah. He goes, you ever just, you know where I'm going with it. You ever go to Walmart and just look around? Just, at the Walmartians. And then all these decrepit, disgusting people like riding their scooters because they're so fat they can't walk, or they're wearing suspenders and no shirt and a mullet that's a redhead with one tooth, and this is what welfare does. It destroys. And I'm thinking, A, is this even worth saving? B, that they get to vote too. C, maybe we're that dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I see a lot of politicians now and then. You get a Tulsi Gabbard or a Rand Paul or somebody. It's like they're intelligent,
right?
But also you get AOC, right? You get You get some real winners.
Adam
And,
Kinzinger.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
He really likes us at the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. He's big fans of
How
us.
about Eye Patch McCain? By the way,
Oh,
3
man.
days away from the death anniversary of John McCain. It's on my calendar. Got a rainbow frog dancing. The guy met with Al Qaeda. I mean, he set our own boats on fire. He gave the Viet Cong their information. The dude was just a sinister. He's like the pale horse. Everywhere he went, he brought death and destruction with him. Anywhere he visited, you knew it was coming, right? And I don't think when people are like, don't speak ill of the dead, nah, fuck John McCain. Do we not speak ill of Hitler?
Right.
Of course we do. With every other monster from anywhere else, we're like, this guy was terrible, blah.
Well,
But
the thing is, like,
no, you can't do that. You can't criticize.
People ask me, like, why do you try to, like, destroy the legacy of someone who's already dead? Well, like Lincoln,
because he
for
shouldn't
example,
have a
like,
legacy. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like Lincoln, like monster responsible for the death of thousands of people.
Millions.
FDR, also a tyrant responsible for the deaths of a lot of Americans, and destroying our economy. So like you have people nowadays who point back to Lincoln or point back to FDR, and then eventually they'll be pointing back to John McCain, and they'll be pointing back to these people saying, see, these were some of our greatest, and we want to aspire to be like
on
them.
The side of a mountain.
No, you don't. You don't want to be like these people. These people were fucking awful. So
Lincoln killed millions, and he killed millions in the 1860s. The percentage of Southerners he killed, if you were to scale that up to 2022, is like having a war and losing 17 million people. I just want to read a quote from Honest Abe for those. And this is just not even a cunt hair worth of evil compared to the totality of that monster for stinking Lincoln. Here's what he said. Our Republican system was meant for a homogeneous people. As long as blacks continue to live with whites, they constitute a threat to the national life. Family life may also collapse, and the increase of mixed breed bastards may someday challenge the supremacy of the white man. Abe Lincoln, what a guy. Yeah, he just wanted to free the slaves. My ass. They get this story in second grade of, the heroic Lincoln.
But my point is, eventually they'll be getting the second grade story of John McCain eventually too.
Oh, I know it.
So if we keep letting
George
these
Bush,
people,
the hero, got rid of Saddam, who tortured and harmed his own people and had WMDs.
Well, I feel like George Bush is one of the only ones who sort of got the reputation he deserved. Like a lot. I mean, he's gotten a little. He's gotten a little bit of a comeback with some like blueing on retards, but for the most part, people are like, yeah, he was a bad president. We shouldn't have gone to Iraq.
Did you see him making airplane noises with those Russian comedians that pranked him? He's going, meow, because they're like, we wanted to ask you because you used to be a pilot. His eyes lit up. He's like, yeah, I was a pilot. And because these people have this paternalistic racism where somebody's sort of talking to you in a broken second language, they just feel like superior. And I'm thinking, yeah, why don't you try and speak Russian to them? You get it. You'll be like Privet Cocktail finished, right? You don't know it, and or if that even they don't even know any words, and they're speaking to you in a second language, and it might sound like a kid or something, but you got to think that's a second language. But he treats them like they're stupid, and they had him making airplane noises, and it was hilarious because of the absurdity. I'm like, this guy used to be the leader of the free world. And look at him. Look at what he's such a moron.
Yeah.
And he's older and wiser, supposedly. And he's just immature, sophomoric asshole.
Yeah.
And they really exposed that on him. And they you got to see it. Look up Russian comedians prank George Bush. I was dying. And it shouldn't be funny. But again, I've crossed that line like the Joker, where I have to just laugh at the absurdity because there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, yeah, just go ahead. It's like when I saw a story. I shit you not. I swear to Jesus, they had. This is a newspaper headline from Portland, of course. Antifa shootout with furries.
Let them fight.
And I'm like, popcorn, please. Furries were they're across this apartment complex shaped like a L, and they were shooting at each other. The people dressed up like animals, and the people who looked like animals pooped them out, were firing on each other. And my little sister gives me the she's my basement liaison. She's like, have you heard of the birdies? Have you heard of the birdies, Reed?
I have not.
Well, since someone poisoned my brain with it, I'm going to share it.
Oh,
so
God.
within this is so trash. Welcome to Spurgatory.
Yeah, thanks.
Within the furry community, there's a hierarchy. I know. Even they have a line, right? The birdies are the ones that dress up like birds and like to be in a cage, like a bird cage.
Are they on the bottom or the top of the hierarchy?
Oh no! Everyone hates the bird people.
Okay, they're the bottom.
Yeah. No one likes them, like because they poop on newspapers. They do bird stuff. I can't even.
Jesus Christ!
I know. I'm like, why do I know this? And she's like, because I had to know it, so you have to know it. Like, it's just what I just did to everybody listening. Now you have that image.
See, this stuff is bad. This makes me like want to, telephone Biden and say, yeah, just send an aircraft carrier straight to fucking China and have them start bombing, get this shit kicked off.
Have you not seen the hashtag Putin please nuke us? Like,
yeah, I've seen it. It's just like, Jesus Christ.
I used to use that, and then I got kicked off Twitter for the dozenth time or whatever. But so it gets worse. It gets more degenerate than that. So I have this group on Telegram called Spurgatory, and abandon all hope, ye who enter type of place, because you've got it's bad. You got like
the
evangelists, the white supremacists, the blacktivists, the flat earthers, the drug addicts. All just
it's the free market of stupid information.
It is like all the dregs of the internet have been, because I won't ban people. I'm almost a free speech absolutist, so I just stick them in this place where you can say whatever, and they do. And sometimes I don't know why. It's like watching racing for the car wrecks or something. Racing is just a redneck left turn. I'll just go in Spurgatory and go, I wonder what's going on in here. And I'm like Arn Anderson when he saw John Tenta. Opens the door.
Yeah.
Shuts it again. Yeah, I open it one time. And there's a woman in her bathtub with floating beer cans in the water, nude, throwing things at the wall, singing karaoke. And there's a big fight and voice chat between the potheads and the alcoholics, telling each other to stick their fingers up the rectum and all this stuff. But it was really funny is when I put this Jewish friend of mine in charge as a moderator, every single faction stopped fighting and teamed up against him. He pissed them all off. This guy is a level 11 troll and really knows how to get under people's skin and just slid into everybody. And that was my punishment. I'm like, you made one of my moderators quit because you guys are so nuts. So I'm going to bring in the biggest asshole I know. And I went to my buddy who is an asshole, but I still like him. And I told him I'm going to bring the biggest asshole I know. So you want the job? He's worse than me. And yeah, that cleaned up a lot of stuff. But within Spurgatory, I learned some new degenerate stuff that I never would imagine. I never knew about the whole Chris Chan. That's Chris Chan cult affair, Sana Chu, all that. Don't even ask. You don't want to. It's so bad.
Yeah, I'm gonna just pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah, just it's so bad. It's so. And then I'm thinking, man, these people are real though. These are the wall Martians. Yeah. This is what the ones that can type are all in Spurgatory.
Mm-hmm.
And that the birdie stuff. They're like, oh yeah, And I started to see photos of this stuff and all that. And then you learn just how deep the basement gets. And I don't know, I guess maybe this is really far off from the topic of the show, but if anyone's interested in Spurgatory, you're welcome to join on purpose. But
yeah, Ryan's Telegram channel is linked in the description. So if you go there, you can find Spurgatory through links on there. So yeah, well, that's a good place to end the show, I guess. Spurgatory. I know you're streaming on Cozy now. What else is new? Where can people keep up with what you're
Oh
doing?
yeah, so that's an irony too, because the guy that runs it, Nick Fuentes, hates my guts. But I guess I was about to join their rival, and so they didn't want me to go there, so they offered me a thing. I'll take whatever. I'm banned on everything.
That's the way to go. Have your adversaries bend to your will to keep you around. That's
what? I've been red pilling their audience though. Like they come in with the N-word and all this immature stuff, and like over the course of like 8 days, I've gotten a lot of them to come around, and they're reading Thomas Sowell and Ted K. And so these people are not hopeless. It's just they get everyone dismiss them. And I'm like Papa of the black sheep. I got all the black sheep. I got Gilad Osman. I had, and it sucks, man. I hate being relegated to Telegram because it is full of a lot of freaks, and it's very hard to police my chat. But I don't have another venue, so yeah, that's where it is. Substack's been good, but that's different medium. And I've got a Telegram where only I post, a Telegram where like people like you can post like anybody, and then there's Spurgatory for everyone with no self-control. Like the gingers, all of the weirdos are down there. And it is entertaining. And now and then they're correct about something. Sounds off the wall, but I don't know, the power of autism or whatever. They figure things out sometimes.
It's like having a bunch of monkeys at a typewriter. Eventually, they're gonna type something accidentally.
It's just, oh man, it's funny. There's a big war between the QAnoners and the man. I don't know. It's my guilty pleasure, I guess. It's like when you want to see that, just like that's our future, When you want to see how bad things are, just look at California, see what they're doing, and go, holy crap, that's going to come across the whole country soon as they move everywhere. You can just steal $950 worth of stuff and not go to jail.
This is why we got to concentrate. That's why everyone's got to move to New Hampshire, fucking vote all these weirdos out, and, be culturally repulsive to non-libertarian people.
If that doesn't work, come to Ocracoke.
Yeah, Ocracoke's the second best thing.
It's really... We're already there. North Carolina can have whatever rules it wants. We just ignore them. So
that's what Maine is like. A lot of Maine, there's like the towns don't even have names. It'll be like Township 237, and the nearest police office is like 45 minutes away. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, we don't have a police office or a court.
Yep.
I mean, we have court, but it is not in a courthouse.
Yep. All right, guys. Yeah, check out the links to my show too. I got a link tree down there. I haven't been doing much the last couple of weeks, like I said, but I'm getting back into it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't. I'm also on Odysee, new on Rumble. That's also
cool. You have Rumble now? Nice.
Got a Rumble now. Everything automatically uploads from YouTube to Odysee and Rumble within a day or two. And then I also have a Substack, Telegram, Instagram. I don't have Twitter. I'm permanently banned off there, just like Ryan. Can't get back on unless there's actually a shakeup at some point. But
isn't that bad? This is how far in our own end zone we are, that we're putting our hope on like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Because better than he couldn't make it worse.
The fucking Neuralink guy is the one we're hoping will save the future.
Right. The guy that thinks he can terraform Mars, is which you cannot do, is the guy like, hey, look, it's like giving medicine to the dead. You can't really make it. It's, you're doing surgery on a corpse. Twitter's so bad. Like they kick you off if you say Rittenhouse did nothing wrong, but they have DM pedophile rings of all these people sharing kitty porn to each other, and they do nothing.
Oh yeah. Completely selective. All right, guys. Thanks for watching the show. We'll catch you on the next stream.